everybody, welcome back to Ghost Socks. Today we are watching Rick and Morty. Is Rick and Morty more powerful than the SCP Foundation? That's a good question. This is gonna be an interesting video because I haven't done a video like this before. So we about to dive right in. You know I'm gonna be talking, so anybody who hate talking, get the fuck out, and let's get started. This is by SCP Explain Stories and Animation. Like, comment, subscribe to SCP Story and Animation. Like, comment, subscribe to me, Ghost Socks, and let's get this fucking video started.
With the amount of research that must be done within the SCP Foundation, including tests on all the various anomalies currently in containment, it is only natural for Foundation staff to include some of the greatest scientific minds in the multiverse. Minds such as Dr. Jack Bright, who began his career as a
Wait, hold on.
with only two outstanding qualities: his keen intellect and his absurdly poor luck, the latter of which was eventually resulted in his temporary demise and resurrection into the technically disembodied consciousness we know and love today. Though having his great mind transferred into the anomalous medallion SCP-963 has only made him more eccentric with time, Dr. Bright might be the poster child for the ideal Foundation researcher, an out-of-the-box thinker with a flexible relationship to his own mortality and morality. Of course, Dr. Bright isn't the only man of science out there who could be classified as an anomaly. As a matter of fact, one particular man on the Foundation's radar could easily claim such a status, and then go beyond it with his nasty habit of bragging about his accomplishments. That man is the
Rick! Hit me with that bullshit. Let me stop.
proclaimed smartest being in the universe, Rick Sanchez. Seemingly the unemployed live-in grandfather of the middle-class Smith family, Rick spends his spare time traveling freely between outer space and different dimensions, assisted by his signature portal gun and a metric buttload of other gadgets of Sanchez's own design. Rick Sanchez has been sought after by the research team of the SCP Foundation on 3 occasions before. Once when the elderly scientist was scouted for a job interview, which he famously didn't take seriously. According to one of the researchers present, Sanchez would repeatedly belch in the middle of his sentences, and over the course of the interview made several references to a supposed cabin in the woods. When asked to elaborate what he meant by those remarks, Sanchez did not. This insubordination, combined with his gas and bad attitude, ultimately cost him the job. Several months later,
Because he liked to burp? Who don't like to burp? He burped. Everybody burp. Leave the burp and do it alone.
SCP Foundation would discover that during the time that Sanchez had been present for his interview, which had taken place within Biological Containment Site-103, the foul-tempered inventor had smuggled several instances of SCP-2941 out of the facility, in what Sanchez himself would later describe as, quote, "one of those bags of holding, you know, from Dungeons and Dragons." As those familiar with the Foundation's records would know, instances of SCP-2941 can be extremely dangerous outside of containment due to the anomalous produce's potential for explosive growth in conditions of increased morale. It was a stroke of good fortune that when Mobile Task Force Theta-4, aka the Gardeners, finally caught up with Sanchez at his earthly home, that all instances of SCP-2941 were recorded as having lower morale levels than had ever been recorded.
Doc
Well,
Ock
damn.
supports letting politicians
Oh my
totally
fucking
ban
God, I
abortion,
wanna hear
with no
this.
exceptions for rape, incest, or to save a woman's life. In the Senate, Mehmet Oz could help
Oh my
ban abortion
God,
for the
I can't
whole
skip
country,
this.
including Pennsylvania.
Hey friends! Today I'm so thrilled because a week ago I applied to this reward program and I just
Okay.
According to Sanchez, he had injected the instances with a specialized serum capable of inducing a state of permanent depression in anything with a conscious mind. To quote Sanchez, "I fixed your dumb fruit problem. You're welcome." While both of the previous occasions were mostly unpleasant for any SCP Foundation staff involved and better left forgotten, it was the third encounter with Rick Sanchez where the man went from being a minor annoyance to a being capable of threatening the Foundation's very existence. It all started, as is often enough the case when misfortune arises, when Dr. Bright got one of his infamous out-of-the-box ideas. The immortal researcher was reviewing the data from the SCP-2941 case and realized that it might be possible for the Foundation to use Sanchez to neutralize other, more overtly hostile anomalies. Specifically,
he's smart as
SCP-682,
that.
the hard-to-destroy reptile.
I'm sorry.
Well,
I'm sorry, but should be your first option. Rick will find a way. If Rick don't have a way, Rick will find a way. What you talking about? Rick and Morty all day.
The Foundation had previously thrown at SCP-682 had done little more than increase its aggression. Dr. Bright imagined that a man as unpredictable as Rick Sanchez might have an invention that could at least weaken the reptile or otherwise reduce its capacity to do harm. Of course, the most delicate part of this proposed solution was securing the compliance of Rick Sanchez in the first place. While many researchers would rather deal with SCP-682 in its current state, rather than risk the involvement of such an unstable individual, Bright was surprisingly optimistic about his chances to obtain Rick's help. Maybe it was the fact that Dr. Bright had always thought of himself as something of a loose cannon by the Foundation's standards, but he wasn't intimidated by Sanchez's brand of chaotic shenanigans. Also, because SCP-682 was one of the anomalies that Dr. Bright was not permitted to make contact with after the...
Yeah, because after the what not to do list, Dr. Bright is the smartest person in the SCP's Foundation. Don't quote me, I don't know. But he might be the smartest person in the SCP Foundation. Because he's immortal. And he been around for years. Put it on his plate. But Rick Sanchez, too, is the smart motherfucker. And he got clones for days. Put it on his cassette. So I'm thinking, like, combine these two smart motherfuckers. We both of them are crazy as fuck. It's gonna be a great, interesting video.
last incident, he felt a sense of duty to contribute to the effort of neutralizing it. If he could help solve one of the Foundation's biggest problems to date, even in an indirect way, Bright would be able to enjoy an immense sense of accomplishment and purpose in his eternal life. Inspired by his own questionable genius, Dr. Bright set about preparing for his confrontation with Rick Sanchez. After all, Bright would be marching straight into the mad scientist's private fortress, the Smith household, and if possible, he would want to be at least twice as prepared as Sanchez was. Dr. Bright's first priority was selecting an anomalous weapon that he could brandish in case the diplomatic approach was a failure. After considering his vast array of options, Bright eventually settled on SCP-3108, also known as the Nerfing Gun. While Sanchez was known to surprise both his friends and foes by deploying never-before-seen gizmos in the heat of the moment, Dr. Bright could rest assured that with the Nerfing Gun as his sidearm, any invention that Rick brought to the table would instantly become less effective after a few well-placed shots. Next was the matter of keeping up with Rick Sanchez in case the scientist decided to escape from the conversation by opening a portal to one of the other infinite realities he had access to. While anomalies that could cross dimensions were far from unheard of at the Foundation, Bright's options for consistent and reliable interdimensional transportation were severely limited. Jack was starting to realize that there was a reason why the formula for Rick's portal fluid was so highly in demand in the greater multiverse. Whether or not he really was the smartest being in the universe, it was clear that Rick Sanchez had one advantage over 90% of the anomalies on record. He had an unparalleled knack for running away. Initially, Dr. Bright was planning to bluff the scientist by arriving at his doorstep.
Who don't though? If the situation gets tough and somebody got something that you don't have and you know your life is in danger, the fuck, man, you're gonna be stupid to be like, yo, I don't give a fuck. Let's do this. Hell fucking no. I love my life.
Step with SCP-507, the reluctant dimension hopper. The hapless and otherwise ordinary young man did possess the potential to follow Rick into any dimension that the portal gun could reach, though because he had no control over when or where his body would be transported, the prospect of having him assist Dr. Bright in chasing Rick was a massive gamble. SCP-507 also didn't knowingly have the ability to bring along other individuals in his unplanned leaps through reality, and with the fact that Dr. Bright had notoriously bad luck, the chances of winding up in the blender dimension would be much higher than usual, even if a shared dimension hop were possible. Dr. Bright thought to himself that maybe Sanchez would know how to stabilize SCP-507's relationship with space-time. Then he laughed to himself in quiet frustration. Was he already turning to Rick for the answers to other anomalous problems when he hadn't even met with him yet? His concern was still neutralizing SCP-682, but somehow even that felt dimensions away now. Feeling a bit depressed, Dr. Bright was all but ready to throw in the towel when an unexpected volunteer expressed interest in Dr. Bright's plan. It was none other than SCP-343, God himself.
Praise Jesus! Really? God knows something. I know what he knows, but he don't tell me what he knows.
God said to Dr. Bright that he had been aware of Rick Sanchez prior to his confinement at the Foundation, and knew the man to be lacking in all forms of humility. He said that even when it came to the heavy responsibilities of creation, Rick had a tendency to view his own suffering in the same way he viewed his supposed better qualities, as yet another competition he was winning. To that end, SCP-343 believed that it was important that he visit Sanchez alongside Bright, in the hopes that a chance interaction with the alleged creator of the universe might humble the man, if nothing else.
Nah, it won't. It's real.
More crucially, SCP-343 was able to do the very thing that Dr. Bright required for this plan to work: free and unrestricted interdimensional travel. SCP-343 warned Dr. Bright that the use of such powers may alarm his so-called next-door neighbor in the other realities, but he also assured the immortal researcher that the beings that most closely resembled 343 himself tend to be generally reasonable. Dr. Bright was a bit confused by that explanation, but he was grateful to have such a powerful and benevolent anomaly at his side if he was to face Rick Sanchez.
No.
With SCP-3108 in his hand and SCP-343 ready and willing to assist should the situation turn sour, Dr. Bright decided that his preparations were complete. He made his way to the Smith household, where Rick would be waiting for him. Fortunately, the man wasn't that hard to find, probably because he wasn't expecting company that day. When Bright arrived at the house, the door to the garage was already wide open. Inside was Rick Sanchez tinkering with some unknown piece of futuristic technology. Dr. Bright knew better than to lead with any questions about Rick's new device, as the answer would probably be some kind of snarky non-answer. Instead, he chose to approach casually, with SCP-3108 behind his back. At this time, SCP-343 had chosen to make himself invisible, vowing to only interfere if Dr. Bright needed to pursue Sanchez through dimensions. Before Dr. Bright had even made it all the way up the driveway, Sanchez indicated that he was aware of the researcher's presence. The rogue scientist didn't even need to look up from his work, and while Bright couldn't quite comprehend what had been said due to an unexpected belch from Rick, he knew that he had been insulted somehow. Not one to be discouraged by mere words, Dr. Bright introduced himself and explained that he was from the SCP Foundation. He reminded Rick of his history with the Foundation, and politely asked Rick if he was interested in doing some pro bono work for them, to which Rick snickered. It was clear that being vague wasn't helping his case, so Bright asked again, this time laying out in more detail the tasks that the research team wanted Rick to perform. Doing his best to avoid giving away any information that might indirectly compromise the Foundation, Dr. Bright explained SCP-682 and its capabilities in the hopes that Rick might agree to see the creature out of a sense of scientific curiosity. Once again, Rick didn't even look in Bright's direction before saying, It's a big universe and I've got better things to do than pick a fight with some lizard. If you want my advice, toss that thing out with the garbage somewhere and forget about it. That way it's not your problem and it's definitely not mine. Dr. Bright wasn't sure how to respond at first. He had heard that Sanchez was unreasonable, but he wasn't expecting the man to suggest that SCP-682 should be released from captivity. The recklessness of such a concept was shocking for a seasoned Foundation researcher, but there was something else. Rick Sanchez didn't seem at all fazed by the existence of 682. The way that the man spoke made it sound like an indestructible monster was beneath him. Could it be possible that Sanchez had faced far worse things before in his adventures through the multiverse? Or was he simply...
Yes. Yes. Yes, he have. Yes. I feel the Holy Ghost. I feel the Holy Ghost. Yes.
too apathetic to register SCP-682 as a threat? He could also be a fool, Dr. Bright thought to himself, but he dismissed that notion immediately. If there was one thing the Foundation knew for sure about Rick Sanchez, it was that the man had to be some kind of genius, sane or otherwise. Dr. Bright was intrigued, and at that moment, that feeling got the better of him. He proceeded to explain the death toll that SCP-682 was capable of, the inevitable loss of life which occurred every time the reptile broke free of containment. Rick gave another dispassionate answer.
Again, it sounds like your organization specializes in taking things that would be better left alone and making them into you problems. If that's what lets you sleep at night, I'm not gonna stop you, but you can't convince me that it's a me problem.
Dr. Bright was at a loss. Surely Rick Sanchez knew that the sacrifices made to keep SCP-682 from escaping the Foundation were necessary to prevent innocent lives from being stolen. The entire point of keeping anomalies secured and contained was to protect humanity from beings like 682. If there were a better way, especially regarding one of the most deadly and malicious creatures that the Foundation had ever come across, naturally, any researcher would want to take it. And yet, here was Rick Sanchez, mocking everything the Foundation stood for. Dr. Bright had to laugh because he finally understood who and what the man he was dealing with now really was. As a former human turned immortal consciousness, Dr. Bright had to reckon every day with the question of how to spend the rest of his endless existence. There had been times since his mind was copied into SCP-963 that Bright had been...
I'm saying, like, if they gonna team up. They gonna team up. I'm sorry if you ever see Merch, but they gonna team up. I just feel it in my bones they gonna team up. Because he's crazy. And he's crazy. And they both crazy. You bring two crazy together, and they are smart as fuck. The smartest peoples. Yeah, some shit gonna hit the fan. God.
Consumed with boredom, he questioned whether it was meaningful to do anything at all with his days. After all, there would just come a point in the distant future where everything and everyone he ever knew would be completely gone. The entire world and most of the people and anomalies within it wouldn't last forever, and he'd probably still be here long after most everything else was gone. Until the necklace his mind was bound to was somehow destroyed, Dr. Bright would live on indefinitely, until everything in existence turned to dust. Because of this heightened awareness of eternity, Dr. Bright had forgotten what it was like to be on the other side of the nihilism he felt daily. He had forgotten that everyone else in the universe was afraid of meeting their end, including Rick Sanchez. That was why he couldn't help but laugh out loud in front of that man. He was laughing because, for all of Sanchez's intelligence, the man was powerless against his own nihilistic apathy and the powerful sense of worthlessness that came with it. Sanchez reacted swiftly to Bright's laughter, craning his neck towards the SCP researcher and asking,
"What was so funny?"
in a seemingly offended tone. Dr. Bright simply responded, nothing," and added that coming here was a mistake. It's not as if Rick Sanchez was actually capable of helping the Foundation deal with 682. Dr. Bright made that remark with as much sarcasm as he could muster, directly to Rick's face. Rick was quick to snap back at Bright with the assertion that he could totally deal with their lizard problem. He just didn't feel motivated to. Just then, Rick's grandson, Morty Smith, came into the garage. He was about to ask his grandfather for help with his and his sister Summer's homework when he noticed Dr. Bright standing by. Morty took one look at the medallion around Dr. Bright's neck and immediately became excited from the sudden recognition.
"Oh geez, Rick, that's Dr. Bright from the SCP Foundation,"
Morty said excitedly.
"Forget my homework, are we doing an SCP adventure today?"
Rick groaned in disbelief.
"No, we're not doing an SCP adventure, because I don't respect them or their weird obsession with imprisoning stuff, and neither should you."
He belched loudly and turned back to his work desk, but Morty's expression turned angry, and it was clear that he wasn't about to leave.
"Typical Rick, there's finally an adventure I want to do, and you're acting like it's lame. You know, a lot of people really enjoy SCPs. There's even this YouTube channel called SCP Explained, and they make these really good videos that explain the lore and tell awesome stories."
Who you talking to right now, Morty? Why are you looking at me talking, Morty? You ain't talking to me right now. You ain't breaking the fourth wall, Morty. They can do that right now. They've been doing that. But you're not breaking the fourth wall talking to me, explaining the YouTube channel right now, Morty. Get the fuck out of here.
Morty said directly into the camera. "Thank you, Morty."
"Whoa, are you doing an ad for them right now, Morty? That's pretty shameless,"
Rick replied. Dr. Bright got the feeling that these two could go on for a while, and he also started to get the impression that he was being ignored. He waited patiently for a lull in the banter, but it didn't seem to be happening anytime soon. Perhaps Dr. Bright could use this to his advantage. Rick Sanchez's portal gun was lying on the garage's workbench not too far away from where Dr. Bright was standing. One well-placed shot from SCP-3108 could be sufficient to cut off Sanchez's means of escape. All Dr. Bright had to do was line up the shot and fire while Sanchez was distracted. Seeing just an opportunity, Dr. Bright moved the nerfing gun into position, but unfortunately for him, Morty, the resident SCP expert of the Smith family, as he was an avid subscriber and watcher of SCP Explained, noticed what he was holding and identified it immediately.
Doc Oz
Oh
supports
my
letting
God, I wanna-
politicians totally ban abortion, with no exceptions for rape, incest, or to save a woman's life.
I'm gonna-
In the Senate, Mehmet Oz
I'm
could
gonna
help
get an
ban
ad
abortion for the
blocker. I'm
whole
sorry,
country,
but I'm gonna get an ad
including
blocker.
Pennsylvania.
Huh? Careful, Rick! Dr. Bright's brought SCP-3108 with him!
Morty shouted. Rick responded,
Well, which one is that again? Is that the bird that causes separation anxiety? No! That's 3103. 3108 is...
Dr. Bright fired SCP-3108 before Morty could finish his sentence, but the boy was more capable than Bright could have anticipated. Sanchez's grandson dove recklessly into the path of the projectile, shielding the portal gun with his body and immediately suffering the anomalous effects of the nerfing gun, devolving into a Neanderthal. Rick looked at Morty, who was now a caveman, and became immediately enraged, and it was easy to understand why. Nobody uses Rick Sanchez's grandson to test strange new inventions, except for Rick Sanchez himself. Rick grabbed his portal gun from his workbench and returned fire on Dr. Bright, creating two portals on the fly, one behind Dr. Bright and the other in the path of the researcher's second nerf round. The projectile zoomed through one portal and out the other to collide with the back of Dr. Bright's head. Since his consciousness was contained inside the medallion, Dr. Bright didn't suffer any mental changes as a result of being regressed to a Neanderthal, but the transformation did grant him a newfound muscle mass and strength only known to his primitive ancestors, and he was about to need it. Rick slammed a large cube on the counter that had a single large blue button on top, and as one must expect...
Oh, you tell me so his ancestor was like a gladiator then? Out here buff as shit, walking around like that, back macking the hoes and shit. Let me stop cursing so much.
pressed the button. Dr. Bright had never seen this before, but this was one of Rick Sanchez's other most prized inventions, the Meeseeks box. The instant Sanchez pressed that button, an unusual blue humanoid materialized into reality from thin air.
Hi, I'm Mr. Meeseeks.
Hi, I'm Mr. Missy.
Look at me.
Oh, God, I love
Said the humanoid, apparently
Look at
known
me,
as Mr.
Mr.
Meeseeks.
Get rid of that
Mr.
guy.
Missy, look at
Rick
me.
ordered, and
I've been
immediately
here
Mr.
for
Meeseeks
20
began
days.
sprinting towards the researcher with single-minded
I was the
determination.
first one. Let's kill them.
Dr. Bright only had time to fire a single shot from SCP-3108 before Mr. Meeseeks grabbed him by the wrists and tried to wrestle the nerfing pistol away. It was a smart move on Bright's part, because the nerf round struck the Meeseeks box directly, rendering it near useless as the exterior turned red and the words Kirkland appeared on the box's side. Annoyed, Rick pushed the Meeseeks box into the trash. While he could rest assured that he wouldn't have to contend with another Mr. Meeseeks, it was taking all of Dr. Bright's current caveman strength to prevent the blue humanoid from disarming him. Desperate to gain some advantage over Sanchez and his inventions, Dr. Bright called for help from SCP-343, which Rick misinterpreted as the researcher praying to be spared from the mad genius's wrath. Sanchez was shocked when 343 became visible and immediately appeared before Mr. Meeseeks. "I release you from your quest for purpose," God said to Mr. Meeseeks, and a grin spread over the humanoid's face. In the next moment, Mr. Meeseeks was gone, returned to the void of non-existence. God then turned to Rick Sanchez with a stern but fatherly look. Rick was unamused.
Oh, would you look at that? Dr. Bright has a literal god on his side.
Rick quipped sarcastically.
What's next? Are you gonna use the power of anime on me?
God wriggled his fingers, and in a flash of light, both Morty and Dr. Bright were restored to their original human selves, or in Bright's case, human in appearance. Morty sputtered,
Oh, Rick, I'm freaking out. I just went through thousands of years of human evolution. I need to lay down.
While Dr. Bright was grateful that his current body felt more like himself again, he had been counting on God to help him defeat Rick Sanchez if things had gone bad, and from the looks of it, the situation was still pretty untenable. That's when Dr. Bright noticed that Rick was no longer trying to fight back. Instead, the rogue scientist was comforting his grandson after the painful process of two-way evolution. Perhaps there was more to this man than his devil-may-care antics and pessimistic outlook. After giving Morty's physical and mental state the bare minimum level of consideration, Rick turned to Dr. Bright and said,
Hey, so, SCP guys, we're gonna have to do a rain check on this whole shebang until Morty is feeling better. I guess he really wanted to do an SCP adventure, so I guess we'll pencil you into our busy Rick and Morty adventure schedule. Just don't bug us about it or make a big deal, and we won't either.
Dr. Bright couldn't help but smile. He may have not have gotten Rick to neutralize SCP-682, but he just might have secured a valuable asset for the Foundation to call upon in the future. And at least that's like half a win, right? Now go check out hilarious list of things Dr. Bright is now allowed to do. And SCP Edition Weirdest Things on Amazon, Dr. Bright's Great Idea. For more Dr. Bright adventures.
Lubba lubba dub dub!
Oh,
With the amount of research
whoa,
that
whoa,
must...
whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be watching more Dr. Bright adventure. So I love that, man. I love that. And if they actually do that in a Rick and Morty, is Rick and Morty still going? I haven't kept up with it for a while. Alright. I hope they do that. That would be crazy. That would be crazy. Alright, everybody. That was it. Rick and Morty Rick and Morty more powerful than the SCP Foundation? It's by SCP Explained Stories and Animation. Like, comment, subscribe to them, and then like, comment, subscribe to me. And without anything else, I'll see you in the